Savvy Business Radio, drawing out the best from our guests with our host, Christina Nichman.
Our guest today is Daniel Miller, president of Texas Nationalist movement, and has been an outspoken advocate for Texas independence since 1996. Today he shares his latest book, Texit, Why and How Texas Will Leave the Union. Find out more about Daniel and Texit at DanielOMiller.com. Hi, Daniel Miller. Welcome to Savvy Business Radio and our Heartbeat of the World segment. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on.
Oh my gosh, you betcha. Joshua, a good friend of mine and yours, introduced us, and you've written a tremendous book, Texit, Why and How Texas Will Leave the Union. Such a rich, deep history, Texas, that most people don't even know the history of our entire United States, and specifically even Texas as well. And I was like intrigued. I was like, Texit, I know I've heard of Brexit, but actually Texit has been around a lot longer than people realize. There's a deep history behind Texas and them wanting to leave the Union. Share a little bit about your background. What brought you to writing this book?
Wow, 20 years of working for Texas independence and having to ask the same questions or answer the same questions over and over.
Yeah.
That's if you really want to get down to it. But, look, I grew up here in Texas. I'm a sixth generation Texan. My first ancestor fought at the Battle of San Jacinto, which won our independence from Mexico. So our family has a rich history here. But, it was one of those things, you look at just sort of, there's nothing extraordinary about what led me to this point, except for when you get to this point, I was raised in a very, I guess you would say, politically active household, only in the sense that my father would put out campaign signs, and we'd watch the nightly news around the dinner table and things of that nature. But just through an experience of just watching his interaction, when I became an adult, I did what I thought I was supposed to do, which was engage in the process. And as I engaged in the process, I never gave a single thought to Texas becoming an independent nation. But what I did begin to understand was the frustration that people have, because I was experiencing it, when I chased around my local congressman who was wanting to, pass a bunch of spending bills and things of that nature. And, and finally, it just got to the point where I reflected on the fact that, I watched my father, who was a Korean War vet. I watched him and I saw how the VA treated him and how the federal government just ground him to powder, whether it was them or the Internal Revenue Service. My father was never a wealthy man. He retired as an iron worker, had traveled all over, worked on buildings in every major city in the United States. But just watching the interaction, the way that he was treated for being a productive member of society, for serving his country, and then personally experiencing the frustration of not being able to change this well-entrenched bureaucracy. So when the idea of Texas becoming an independent nation was presented to me back in 1996, it made sense because it solved all of those issues. But more than those grievances, it really got down to one of the biggest motivating factors that we find right now in the support for Texit, and that is that Texans believe that the best people to govern Texas are Texans.
Yeah, and what most people didn't know, and I didn't know until recently myself, is that Texas was independent completely. It was not part of our original union. It was for 9 years a republic. It stood on its own. It fought against Mexico and won its independence, as you said, and for 9 years was its independent country. It was recognized by other countries, by Britain, by France. And it was only due to hardship of debt, it decided to, and there were not all parties in Texas who are cool with it, but some parties who decided, hey, let's just put in to join the union. And it was also not here recognized by politicians and other people running in this country, in the United States of America, who actually wanted to accept them at first. Share a little bit about that background.
Yeah, I mean, look, Texas has a very rich history. It existed as part of what was essentially the United States of Mexico. Of course, we had
Mm-hmm.
a Declaration of Independence and a revolution, and we won our independence, as I previously mentioned. And we were a self-governing republic for 9 full years before becoming a member of the Union. But what's interesting about that is that there are so many people out there that think that that's sort of a unique experience, and they don't look to the actual, the unanimous Declaration of Independence of the 13 colonies, or as we like to shorten it, the Declaration of Independence. They don't read it in enough depth to understand that at the moment that Declaration of Independence was signed by the 13 colonies, because of the language and their intention of the people who signed it, those 13 colonies essentially became 13 independent, self-governing nation state. Okay. It even says as much in the Declaration of Independence. So there's this thought, obviously, that, Texas has sort of this unique history, but while it may be unique, it's not uncommon in the experience of states within the United States.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that was the whole point of the founding fathers bringing our union together, was that all the states shall govern themselves, that the actual people will come together locally and in their state to put forth policies that fit them as a people, that the people will govern themselves, not that there'll be this one huge governing body to rule over us. We've just traded the British government for now the federal government. It's not called a kingdom, but it might as well be. And it's kind of over generation, people of the 50 states have become comfortable with letting this one huge governing body rule over us, and then just complain and say, oh, we have no voice in the matter. But you do have a voice in the matter. And recently, in our recent elections, it proved that most of the 50 states were like, no, we're sick of this. We do not want one governing body called the federal government to rule over us. We, the people, want to have a say.
That's true. But, the fallacy is, and one of the things that has really fueled the Texit movement and has grown support for it, the understanding that it's a fallacy that a single election or electing a specific position is going to really change anything on the federal side. You're looking at 180,000 pages of federal laws, rules, and regulations administered by roughly 440 separate federal agencies. Even they can't count the number of agencies they have. 2.5 million unelected bureaucrats. I mean, we don't get to vote for those bureaucrats, but yet whether, no matter who gets elected president, no matter who gets elected to Congress or the U.S. Senate, that bureaucracy maintains. And so, while you see these things happening and people vest their hopes in these federal elections, the reality is the real power in the federal system, the real machine that is taking away the sovereignty of the states and the rights and the freedoms of the individuals is someone or a group of people that we don't have a say in. We don't get to vote for.
Yeah, it is very scary. And when I talk to people, that is kind of the consensus, that we'll get this one person out there, will be just the right person. And I've seen this in the last couple of elections, either for Senate or presidency, where they almost act like these people are their gods. And I'm like, no, they're people. They're human beings who screw up just like us, who do mistakes, who do good things. But you cannot look to one person to solve all your problems. I think it was about 12 years ago, I'd read a book of a conservative, but he had said that, at this point in time, we used to have people like could stand up and be like the leader for all this, this movement. But today's time, we can't have just one person standing out there as the leader of a movement. It has to be every single person standing up and saying, I'm for freedom, I'm for liberty, and not waiting for that one individual person. Because one person stands up, has a lot of influence and gets attention, well, they'll just be knocked off and eliminated. And then we'll be standing there with no one. So it's got to take less sheep and more leadership, where we all kind of stand up and be a leader of it.
Well, and to a certain extent, I think that's been one of the largest barriers. I tell people a lot of times as I'm out speaking about Texas independence and really trying to communicate this message to folks, tell them, and some people understand, some people don't, but I tell them that really our greatest enemy in self-government, in this fight for self-government, is not the federal government. It's not a deep state, bureaucracy. It's not the mainstream media. the biggest enemy that we often have is ourselves and the lack of hope. We have been told for so long that there are no solutions, there is no fixing this, that so many people believe it. Mm-hmm. It's interesting, and I talk about this in the book, of course, obviously from sort of our experience here in Texas. Mm-hmm. But, we get into these cycles where we rage against what's going on, and then we get some sort of crumbs from the master's table, and people seem to be satiated by that. Or folks abrogate their responsibility. They say, like you use the example of, leadership like Martin Luther King. The thing is, when you have leaders like that, when, you look at Dr. King didn't march by himself. Those other people had to do their part. They had to sit at the lunch counters. They had to march across those bridges. They had to feel the truncheons across their skulls. There was a price to be paid by the individuals. And while you may have leaders that step out and say this, the fact of the matter is that so many folks have abrogated their responsibility. But look, that's changing. And again, it's something that I highlight from our experience here in Texas. When you begin to take an issue like this, okay, a good example is sort of where the debate has been as far as Texit is concerned. Cycle typically goes, the federal government does something heinous. People here in Texas take to social media, go to rallies, and someone inevitably yells secede or Texit, okay? And so the response from the opposition is, you can't do that. And then the debate stops. And, people put bumper stickers on their trucks that say secede, and, the armchair quarterbacking academics and the people who really don't know what they're talking about love to fire back. Well, that'll never happen, or you can't do that. And that's where the debate has been for the longest time. However, we're in a place right now where those types of answers, those types of, if you want to call them loosely discussions, are not satisfying. Now, and what I really hope to do with the Texit book is arm our supporters with the information that they need, and just really not just them, but even the opposition. I mean, I really want to elevate the debate on this issue so that we're not reduced to, bumper sticker slogans and one sentence answers or responses, that we actually begin to have a conversation about whether or not being a member of the federal union best serves our people here in Texas. And really, it's a conversation that needs to be had by people in every single state in the union right now.
Yes, I completely agree. Do you see that if Texas does become the first state to exit, that it will give this idea to the rest of the states that you can govern yourself, that it is possible to be free people?
Well, I think it should. One of the things that we identified several years ago there was that in 35 different states in the union, there were either strong sovereignty movements or outright independence movements. Okay, so you look at 35 out of the 50 states. That's a significant portion. So I think these conversations are being had, or at least to a certain degree, the right questions are being asked. But, that I think is what I hope happens, is that if Texas sparks this, if we're first, and there's some debate over whether or not we're going to be first, I believe that it's an inevitability. Texas will leave the union at some point. But if we are first, I really would hope that just even the debate leading up to the referendum that will cause Texas to withdraw its membership from the union will spark these conversations. We know they're being had, and they should. Yeah. Does the union serve my state is really what people need to ask.
Yeah. And I think it's almost become synonymous with people that the actual federal government is us. And they're not. They've become a separate entity that is separate from the people. And they were never meant to rule over us. They were meant to protect the entire union, the entire 50 or 13 colonies at first, from, foreign invasion, from, invasion within, but not to rule over the people as as a kingdom of such. So I think people have got to start to examine where we came from and to realize that it was really about self-governance. It was never meant to be a one governing party called the federal government to rule over the people.
Right, right. But and look, not to shift gears, but I think it's important for us to really tackle this particular aspect of it, because I can imagine that there's someone out there right now listening to this, and they're talking, they're running through all these various scenarios in their minds. If a state leaves the union, then it's they'll be cut off, and what about trade? And it's the old what if statement: if ifs and buts were candy and nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas, right? But here's what people need to understand. People get really wrapped up in the what ifs and the disaster and doom scenarios. And I think it's important to understand how things work right now. I talk about it. I write an entire chapter about this particular aspect of it in the book. And it's this: look at how things work. I mean, how many nations around the world are self-governing nation states that have that trade with the United States, that travel to and from the United States, that share a mutual defense with the United States? I mean, there's dozens and dozens. I mean, look at NATO for mutual defense, or look at the 22 other countries around the world that have free trade agreements with the United States. Just because we are no longer in a absolute political and economic union doesn't mean that the world stops. It doesn't mean that a state becomes an island. Trade, travel, banking, defense, all of those things can be done outside the context of an absolute political and economic union.
Yeah. You wouldn't completely well, now we're going to just let you starve. Because actually, when you first were a republic yourselves, you were connecting with other countries in France and Britain and signing treaties. And the same would go on. It wouldn't end. You would just have your own money, your own constitution, and you'd be following your own rules.
Right.
And we'd come visit your country, the country of Texas. Yeah, it would be awesome. But more, for me, what I really stood out for me and made me excited about your book is this talk that we, as you said, that we could all have in 50 states where we don't have to feel disgruntled anymore. And what I see, if we have people going to town hall meetings, or if they do go, it's usually when they've gotten to the point of, I'm so fed up, I'm just going to rant and holler and scream at my council people or whatever. And I'm like, that's not solving anything. You've gotten to a point where you're so angry, you're just spewing hate and anger. And this is what's happening with people of different points of view, who even think they have different points of view sometimes, because sometimes their points of view are stuff they just heard on TV and they've assimilated and said it's true. They haven't even examined it for themselves, but they're spewing this kind of negativity at each other and really not solving anything. So, I mean, waiting till you get to you're super angry and then trying to go fix stuff, it's probably not going to be all that effective. But to have the conversation where we're talking with our neighbors and our family about what can we really do to be more self-governing, to participate in being a citizen.
Yeah, it's an observation that I've made on more than one occasion. I'm not the only one to make it.
Yeah.
When you look at a good idea, and it's not just here in Texas, but places all over, you look at voter turnout and really how informed the voters are in, say, municipal elections or state level or county level elections. You see a lot less engagement in those as opposed to the federal side. And so imagine right now how much better, how much more informed the electorate would be if that layer of federal distraction were removed, right? Suddenly now you're not dealing with the federal government. Now you're looking at your state. Okay. So now you're looking at your governor, your legislature, your assembly, whatever it is, with a fine tooth comb, because now they're governing. And those are the people that you can directly impact in your community. Those are the people that you can drive to the capital of your state and give them a piece of your mind. Whereas it's not easy for people throughout the United States to connect with their congressman, to be heard by their senator, talk to to talk to the president. Those things are far removed. So if you remove this layer of distraction, I mean, think about it, even the news cycles are inundated with federal, while we're dealing with issues of governance right here at home that people don't seem to be informed by, because they are just absolutely engaged in the latest outrage from the bureaucrats in D.C.
Yeah, I've long, and I think my mid-20s, I got involved a little bit with the Democratic Party, feeling that they were the party of the people. So I would go on marches and stuff like that, thinking, oh, I'm making a difference. And I thought one day I'm going to run for president because that's where I'm going to make the most change. Well, as probably you did too, and you got into the more political arena and you started to see how things operated, I felt more and more disillusioned. I said the average folk isn't able to get involved at a federal level as much. But, it didn't occur to me at that time that I could make the most change as a citizen at my local level. And to start there, that the president can only do so much, or a senator or congressman, but where you can make the most change where you live is right there locally.
Right. And here's what's, I think, obviously acting locally is where you see sort of the most instant gratification, right? The potholes get filled, that.
Yeah.
The traffic lights get fixed. I mean, your trash gets picked up. Those local things are where you see the most direct impact. But here's where here's where I think a good source of the support for Texit comes in, and where more and more people should be looking at, and regardless of their state, looking at renegotiating their relationship in the union. And it gets down to this: no matter what decisions we make on a local level, okay, whether it be in our cities, our counties, or in our state, no matter what decision we as voters make, by the stroke of a pen, it can be overridden by some unelected federal bureaucrat. We've seen it time and time and time again here in Texas. I mean, when Greg Abbott, who is our current governor, was the attorney general, he sued the federal government over 60 times for violating for imposing some rule on us that overturned the will of the Texas voters. And of course, I think he won like maybe 6. So, this is something people need to understand, is that when we're on our local level, regardless of what your partisan affiliation is or whether you skew left or skew right, the fact of the matter is we could sit here and argue until we're blue in the face. And let's say we come to a decision. Hey, we have figured this out. We've shaken hands on this. We've decided that this is what needs to be done. All that it takes is the stroke of a pen by some unelected federal bureaucrat to undo every single bit of that. That's what it's like to not be self-governing.
Wow. And that is really, really scary to realize that, in essence, you don't really have power if it can be taken away. Now, do you think for the people who choose that, hey, I want to stay part of the union, I want to be part of the entire union and not leave and secede, is there possible that we can get the federal on terms with the entire 50 states or 49 states or whatever it be, that we work together instead of separately?
Well, I honestly believe that at this point, the federal government is beyond repair. As a system, it is fatally and terminally broken. You wind up in this situation where various interest groups vie for control so that they can use the federal government to impose their will on everybody else, right? So it's this back and forth. All the while, the bureaucracy grows, the money gets printed and spent, the freedoms get eroded. So the federal government's intractable in its current form. So there's this thought by many that says, look, why leave? Let's just lead and let's reform it. But it's beyond reform. Look, it's been proven. They throw out this idea that the federal government should be reformed as though that's a new idea. Instead of, acknowledging the fact that it's been tried for decades to reform the federal government, and it's gone to the complete opposite direction. It's only grown. The regulations have gotten more. That we're at $21 trillion worth of debt. So, I think at this point where people are going to have to come down to is, look, those who want to stay as a part of that federal system should by all means have that option. The states that want to stay in the union should have that option, much like how Brexit and pulling Britain out of the EU is not going to destroy the EU. Having Texas or other states pull out of the federal union is not going to destroy the United States of America. Okay, that's just garbage. But beyond that, I think that as independent, self-governing nation states, we should be able to negotiate with one another best terms for our people in the manner that we see fit. So, would an independent Texas have a travel agreement with the United States? Absolutely. What's left of the United States? Would Texas be in a mutual defense with the United States? Absolutely. But would we subject ourselves time and time again to, passing laws that govern Texans and only govern Texans? Would we continue to subject ourselves to passing those laws and having them overridden by people that we don't have a say in electing? And the answer is absolutely not. I think if you want to flip it back around, I think what everyone in every state should be asking themselves right now is this. If my state were currently an independent nation, would we vote to enter the union? And why would we cast that vote? Why would we decide to do that? What is the attraction of the federal union? Is it the $21 trillion worth of debt? I mean, is that their selling point?
Yeah. You know what I think it is, honestly? I think it's this fear that you feel people I've talked to about, because we've heard now California exit, Cal exit,
right,
where certain parts of California have talked about exiting the union. And I think what it is the fear from people who don't want it is that, hey, we'll be, as you said, like an island out in the middle of nowhere, and we can't possibly survive as this big family unit. But this big family unit, as you said, as we were talking about, is not healthy and is not helping everyone, and it is not in a good state. And you're right. The people who are serving at the federal level, they have a lot of power, the officials and the bureaucrats, and they're not about to give it up just because we say, hey, let's sit down and have a talk and let's work together. Like, no, we kind of like not working together, making loads of money off of you guys, the taxpayers, and we'll just stay like this. Because really, they don't really have any reason to give up their power unless we, force them to.
Look, no parasite ever wants to be removed from its host, right? I mean,
exactly.
But look, to your point about this fear of survivability if a state leaves the union. Obviously, Texas can make a great case for it. I mean, we're always in the top 10 economies of the world by GDP. I mean, we've got deep water ports. I mean, across every criteria, Texas is not, as an independent nation, is not just prosperous. It's a global powerhouse. Mm-hmm. But here's what I want people to understand, regardless of the state that they live in. And it's this. If you were to take your state and rank it against the countries of the world, okay, all these other self-governing independent nation states, every single state in the United States fares better than the vast majority of other self-governing independent nation states out there if they were a standalone nation, whether it be by state level GDP, whether it be by workforce, education, so you look at it from that standpoint and you say, okay, so what is it about those people that says that, hey, they can make it as an independent nation state, but we can't? I mean, ultimately, isn't that just a lack of confidence? It's an irrational fear that's put out there by those people that support the status quo, that really support the parasitic federal government. And frankly, more and more what we're seeing here in Texas and elsewhere is that people are no longer afraid. Those scare tactics just aren't working.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. I think that's why people are going to alternative media all over the internet, and why now the mainstream media and the government are trying to pin them as being alt this and that and fake media. It's because they really don't want people to think for themselves. They don't want you to pick up a book. Soon they're going to start burning libraries. But really they want you to do and listen to what we tell you. Don't look over there. Don't look over there. Just listen to us. Let us fill your brain with whatever you're supposed to be thinking. And what I just truly hope is that what you're saying here today, those are really important questions. I want everyone to not take anything we ever say on this show or anywhere else, true or not. Just go out there and educate yourself. Pick up a book, learn, ask questions. The biggest thing that you just said today that was so important is that asking of questions. What would it mean to us to stay in union? What benefit would it be? And if we were not in union, why would we want to join? That's a great question. If we were outside and we weren't part of it, what would make us say, hey, I want to be part of that group?
Well, you look at it from the standpoint, and some people say this is an apples to oranges comparison between the United States and the European Union, but I actually completely debunked that in the book, where you can make a fair comparison between the two because of how they are both constructed. But you have those people inside the European Union, in these various countries, like, the folks that were on the side of Brexit, where you have these folks in Italy that are talking about wanting to leave the EU, all these various countries, and they refer to them by a term of Eurosceptic. And I think that many of us should begin to adopt that mindset and become Ameroskeptics. Look, just because we don't want to be in a fully integrated political and economic union doesn't mean that we don't trade with one another, that we're not friends with one another, that we protect one another. It is just a sign that says, look, we believe that the best people to govern our state are the people of our state, and not some faceless, heartless, parasitic, unelected bureaucrats in a capital that I can't visit on the daily if they get out of hand.
Yeah. Well, this has been so fantastic and insightful. I'm really hoping it'll engage everyone to go out there and just go deep. Figure out for yourself what is important to you. What is your value system? What do you want to see left for your children, grandchildren in this country, in this state, wherever you're living? And I have to thank you again, but don't leave without letting everyone know where they can get your awesome book, Texit, Why and How Texas Will Leave the Union. Where can they do that?
Sure. They can pick it up at Amazon, Barnes & Noble. Frankly, any major book retailer has Texit right now, and the Kindle version is available right now. The hardback is due out the third week of May. So we're really, really looking forward to folks reading it and getting the feedback on it.
Thank you so much. I thank you so much, Daniel, for all the work you're doing to enlighten all the folks of Texas as well as the United States. And I thank you so much for coming to share your great wisdom today on Savvy Business Radio.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Savvy Business Radio broadcasts worldwide via a large podcast network, celebrating business owners, entrepreneurs, influencers, and successful individuals. Find out about our paid sponsorship opportunities or how to become a guest. Call 732-474-7375 or email Christina@savvybusinessradio.com.